Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Aryeh Green. He's an author of Finding Peace in the Promised Land and also a policy advisor. And we learn about his five-step pragmatic framework for real peace between Arabs, Muslims, and Israelis, that is Jews. So we'll explore with him what most people misunderstand about the Middle East conflict, why the world is so obsessed with Israel, and practical steps leaders and people can take immediately. Welcome to the show, Aryeh.
Thank you very much, AJ. I'm very, very happy and pleased to be on with you today.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Aryeh, welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about Middle East peace, which many think that is difficult to resolve. But we'll talk about your framework, your ideas, your book, so that it can benefit a lot of people. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, your story, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Well, thanks. I basically grew up in the United States of America, and I've lived here in Israel for over 40 years now. I've got a background in business, a master's in international relations, as well as in business. I've spent many years in the public sector as well as the private sector, including working in Israel's Prime Minister's office with Mr. Natan Sharansky, one of the leading advocates for human rights and freedom in the world, a former refusenik in the former Soviet Union. And this last decade, I've been working to bring renewable energy to Africa and other vulnerable communities around the world, while I've also written a book about hiking the length and breadth of Israel on what's called the Israel National Trail, where I hiked for 8 weeks straight, 2 months straight, and wrote a book about both the hike itself and meeting personal challenges, because I learned quite a few lessons which helped me to heal from what was a devastating divorce at the time. And those lessons have helped many others to meet their own personal challenges. And in the last few years, I ended up realizing how adaptable the lessons learned while hiking the trail and meeting our personal challenges, getting over my divorce, how applicable those lessons or those elements are to a radically different way of finally bringing peace to the Arab-Israel conflict, or between Muslims and Jews, and in general here in our region.
Absolutely, absolutely, Aryeh. So you have the solution. Others have been, ramming their heads for a solution. Intelligent people in Israel, intelligent people everywhere, intelligent people in the US, intelligent people, all across the world. Are you more intelligent than all of them, Aryeh? That you have a solution, they don't.
Well, AJ, I have to believe that from the way that you asked the question, you must have read at least the initial chapter in the book, because after the prologue and introduction, the first chapter is all about humility. And so, no, it's not that I have a better answer, or that I'm smarter, or what have you. It's in fact, that's one of my greatest criticisms of those who have attempted over the last 100 years to try and resolve the conflict, because most of those who have tried have lacked in humility. They thought, I can just come in here and make a deal, or I'm smarter than everybody else, and I can push the parties to some sort of accommodation. And so, no, it's not that I know anything more or am more intelligent. What is true, and I approach it very much with great humility, is that what I've done is perhaps to compile or to aggregate a number of basic truths, which I think an objective observer of the conflict over the last 100 years kind of has to acknowledge. And by putting these truths together with great humility, I've managed to bring us to an understanding of what really needs to change, what really needs to happen in order to allow real peace in our region to emerge. There's a very famous, I guess, medieval Jewish scholar who said, called the Ramchal, who said in one of his books, I brought nothing new, nothing innovative in this book. What I've done is I have compiled a number of truths that we should constantly remember and be aware of and have in front of us as we seek to achieve whatever goals we have. And in this case, that's basically what I've done. I've put together great wisdom from the traditions of Islam, of Judaism, of Christianity, universal values. I've brought together quotations from the Bible, from the Quran, as well as from both historical, traditional, and modern thinkers and leaders, political leaders, cultural leaders, and religious leaders, in order to remind us all of these five elements, which basically are the crucial foundations for any real movement towards peace between our peoples.
Absolutely, absolutely. Aryeh, we'll come to the 5 steps that you talk about. We'll come to your book. Let us understand, from especially from my part of the world, someone who tries to understand, or any other part of the world which is away from that region. When they see all this for so many years, with so many talks, so many, discussions, so many countries involved, and still no peace, it's difficult to understand why is it not happening. Is it because it has become business, almost like an industry in that part of the world, and that some people benefit a lot, and it really doesn't matter? Some more blood, some more life goes on, and business goes on. Is that what the real reason is? How would you like to answer this aspect of perception that a lot of people outside that zone may have?
Well, I want to be perfectly frank. You're right. There are certain elements over the last 30 or 40 years of what we might call the peace processors, the people in the business of promoting peace processes, and they have a vested interest almost in continuing the process itself rather than actually reaching peace. But no, I think the objective understanding of why we haven't been able to reach peace in the last 10, 40, 50, 100 years here between Jews and Muslims, between Israelis and Arabs, is because, as I think somebody said to me the other day, we've been looking for love in all the wrong places. We've been trying to negotiate agreements based on maps and borders and issues of sovereignty and military history and factors, whereas we have really either ignored or discarded, or to a certain extent never really looked at and focused on the real source, the foundational source of the conflict itself. And to a certain extent, that's one of the issues I think that is most important, and probably most familiar to your listeners, certainly those in India, because a lot of it relates to a Gandhian approach to reality, to truth, to peace, to understanding what those real foundations are.
Absolutely. So, in that backdrop, and I appreciate your ideas, do you think every good idea almost sounds utopian and non-doable to people who are so neck deep into that process of peace, and that is why it will not happen? Is that how do you, an optimistic person or a not so optimistic person, Aryeh, about peace in the Middle East, seeing this backdrop that we just discussed.
Well, I'm a born optimist. I have always been an optimist. I've always been one to look on the positive side of almost any challenge. So I'm not sure I can really agree with you when you put it that way. I think that a certain skepticism or cynicism in most endeavors is probably appropriate. We shouldn't be unrealistic. But again, you refer to those who aren't necessarily that deeply involved or aware of the subtleties or the nuances of our conflict. And I think that there actually is a lot of room for optimism. And I think that it's a very important element of an understanding of what we can and should be pushing the leaders of our countries for, as well as the leaders of other countries in terms of what they should be encouraging and what they should be focusing on.
Absolutely. So, do you think the peace has to be brought between the two parties, or other parties will have to be party to that peace? How does that look like? Now, let's talk about the framework, five-step framework that you have got in your book, Peace in the Promised Land.
So, first of all, you kind of asked two questions. Um, Question number one is, should other parties be involved? And the question number two are, what are the five elements that I bring to both books? Um, I think the understanding that most of us have, both outside observers and those who are involved in the conflict, is that there are other parties that are involved. And let me rephrase the question to a certain extent. When you say other parties, if you mean Russia or China or the United States or Europe or India, then my answer is no and yes. No, their involvement is not an integral part of the process or the approach that we have to bring peace to the region, but their encouragement is imperative, and that encouragement can be philosophical or principled or political or military or economic. But the question is, who are the parties to the conflict? And that's, I think, one of the most important elements of the answer to your first question. The parties are not just those Arab residents of the Middle Eastern kind of strip of land here on the Eastern Mediterranean who call themselves Palestinian. Those who self-identify as Palestinian certainly have a cause to pursue in terms of the potential of an independent Palestine. And we won't talk about maps or geography or where that Palestine might actually be established. The issue is much wider than that. Our conflict predates any discussion of the idea of a Palestine or the Palestinian national movement. The conflict, as it's understood by historians, by others that are involved integrally with these issues, is a conflict basically between the Arab nation, the entirety of the Arab world, as well as the entirety of the Muslim world. And so the focus has to be on the leaders of those Arab countries and Muslim nations who have perpetuated this conflict with their hostile and violent rejection of the return of the people of Israel to their ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. Now, that may sound provocative, but it's actually historically, as well as religiously, as well as politically and legally accurate in terms of an understanding of the conflict. So the parties that are involved run the gamut from the leaders of Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and all the other Arab nations of the Middle East, but also the leaders of religious and political leaders of the wider Muslim world, including both Southeast Asia as well as elsewhere in the world, including, of course, there in India. So it's an interesting question about which party should be involved. My proposal is that the leaders of all Arab and Muslim nations, the leaders of all Jewish communities, and the leaders of Israel have to be involved in what is basically a historical movement of reconciliation between all of us. And that's what makes this approach so very radical. So you asked, your second question was about the five elements, and I obviously won't go into any great detail, but I said the first element was humility. The second element is appreciation and acknowledgement the second element is acceptance and acknowledgement of the realities that we're facing, accepting both the historical and the current realities, and accepting the legitimacy of every actor and player in the conflict. The third element is gratitude or appreciation, and the gratitude that we have to have, not just to God or the fates or what have you, for bringing us to the situations that we're in now, but for all of the positive things that have occurred over the last 100 years, over the last generations, over the last decades, to bring us to the point now. And that would include also, by the way, the Abraham Accords, where some Arab leaders accepted the legitimacy of Israel, accepted the justice, the historical justice of the return of the Jewish people, of the people of Israel to the land of Israel, um, and started to develop real steps towards real peace between us. And the last elements are forgiveness, which is central to the Arab-Israel conflict. It was one thing for me to forgive my wife, who decided to pursue a divorce. It's another thing for an entire nation or entire people or an entire religious community to forgive another entire nation or community. And there's a lot of forgiveness to go around that has to be achieved between both Arabs and Jews, Muslims and Israelis. And the last element is a sense of purpose, to give our lives meaning, as Viktor Frankl spoke about and wrote about so eloquently. A sense of purpose that's not obviously simply destroying the modern nation state of Israel. That sense of purpose, that goal, is not one which really fits into the rubric of peacemaking, but rather a sense of purpose and a goal to work towards the betterment of each of our communities, to work towards the betterment of humanity, the goal of reaching real peace, real accommodation, tolerance, acceptance of the other. That's the fifth element, which is so important. It was important for my healing from my divorce, in terms of having a sense of purpose of where my life was next going, personally, professionally, and otherwise. And it's certainly a central element for the Arab and Muslim and Jewish and Israeli communities to set themselves goals and objectives that are positive and that are life affirming.
Absolutely, Arya. So all these are great, things, very human, very humane. But who has to get started with these things? Is it only is it the Palestinian side? Is it the Israeli side? How do you see that actually working on the ground?
Well, the last chapter of my book focuses very much on tangible, practical, pragmatic steps that can be taken on all these levels, both on a people to people basis, in terms of communities, teachers, sports groups, and what have you, as well as obviously at the political level, at the strategic level, the diplomatic level. And there are all sorts of ways which each of these five elements can be implemented. Some of them already are, as I mentioned about the Abraham Accords. There are business relationships. I've been to Bahrain. I've been to Dubai myself, on business trips, with business relationships as well as personal relationships with many in the Arab world. Also, because of my work with Sharansky promoting democracy and freedom in the Arab world, I have friendships and professional associations with many Egyptians, Jordanians, Palestinians, of course, as well as from Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region. And it gets a lot deeper than that. And we don't have time now to go into any of the real details, but my book does. And one can actually imagine, without reference to the book, there are all sorts of ways where Israelis and Arabs can work towards a better, from a sense of humility and gratitude and an acceptance of the other, and a forgiveness of the other, towards a set of objectives and goals, which begin, of course, with the reduction of the rhetoric of hatred and animosity, mostly on the Arab and Muslim side, directed at Jews and Israelis or others who are not Muslim or not Arab, but also on the Israeli side, um, as a first step in our public discourse, and whether that's in the educational fields or in the statements of leaders or in our cultural milieu on television, radio, or what have you. There's no question that reducing the rhetoric of animosity towards Israel and towards Jews or Christians or others is a very, very central first step. And let me just add that it's important to understand in this kind of a conversation, yes, there are two sides to every conflict. And yes, Israel and the Jewish community around the world and the Jews in Israel, as well as the Arab Muslims and Bedouin and Druze and other Israeli citizens, Israel has steps to take to work towards peace. It's not only on the side of the Arab and Muslim world. But one of the things that we're a little bit more free to say today than we might have said 10, 20, 30 years ago because of political correctness, after October 7th and after the terrible terrorist attacks across the world against infidels, against Christians, against Jews, against Israelis, against the Brits or the Americans or others in Nigeria, you name it, across the globe, I think there is a burgeoning understanding that it is both acceptable and necessary to demand of leaders in the Arab and Muslim world to begin this process or continue this process of reducing the hostility. There are many moderate, centrist, nonviolent Arab and Muslim leaders, politicians, cultural leaders, academics, and social media influencers, and what have you. I think our responsibility is to help promote them, to help promote their voices, to help encourage those in the Arab and Muslim society who are willing to speak out against the hatred, against the animosity, against the violence, to help give them a voice. And that's very much one of the goals of my book.
Right, right, Aryeh. So, who is this book for? Is it for Donald Trump? Is it for Netanyahu? Is it for Hamas? Is it for someone else?
I love the question, AJ. I'll start with the end. It's not for Hamas because Hamas, by definition, like the leaders of Iran or Hezbollah or Boko Haram or ISIS or Al Qaeda, these are not our interlocutors for any of us across the Western world, whether you're Hindu, Christian, Jewish, atheist, or others. Those are not the groups and those are not the leaders who are going to be open to an exploration of the more moderate, peaceful, tolerant sides of their own traditions. No, the book is very much for policymakers in the West. Yes, Donald Trump, also the leaders of Europe, the leaders of India as well, and anybody else who truly cares about and believes in the importance of promoting peace between Arabs and Israelis, between Muslims and Jews. It's first and foremost for those policymakers and or public figures who are interested and involved, but it's also for the general public or academics or cultural leaders who are intrigued by, who are confused by, who are concerned by both what happened on October 7th and its aftermath, what happened in Gaza, what's happening in Iran, and what's happening across the Arab and Muslim world and across the globe, really. It's for anybody who cares about and wants to believe that there is a path to peace which is pursuable, and it's written specifically with references, as I mentioned at the beginning, to traditional voices of moderate Islam, both going back to the Quran and the Hadith, to medieval and later scholars, religious leaders, as well as currently today's scholars, religious leaders, and political leaders who are willing to voice that very, very important issue and call for what we might say is a reformation in Muslim and Arab society of moving towards moderation and acceptance and towards real peace and humanity. That's why the subtitle of my book is From Hatred to Humanity.
Absolutely. From hatred to humanity. The path of peace is always available. And with your optimism and your framework, it looks like it is very much out there. When do you see these parties walking on the path? 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, or maybe another century later, another set of generation, another set of leaders?
It's a beautiful question, AJ, and it's a great way to kind of conclude our conversation because I can't answer it. I can't say is it going to be in 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades or 2 generations. But what I can say is this: first of all, I'm not proposing anything that hasn't yet been said, and I'm not proposing that we begin something. I'm proposing that we strengthen, that leaders of the world who are interested in peace strengthen the hands, strengthen the voices of those who are already walking that path of peace. There are moderate Palestinians, moderate Arabs, and Muslims throughout the world whose voices can and should be amplified, whose movements, like Mohammed Dajani, who's the head of a moderate Muslim movement in Palestinian society called Wasatiyah, who's a wonderful and great man and scholar. He should get funding from whatever sources are interested in real peace because he promotes a very moderate approach to Islam, which is based on Islamic sources, but they're Islamic sources which, unfortunately, too many in the Muslim and Arab world over the last few generations have ignored and instead focused on the more intolerant and more violent sources which also exist in the Quran and the Hadith. I think that's what's most important to understand. The more we support the moderate and peace-oriented leaders in the Arab and Muslim world, as well as in Israel and Europe and America and India and elsewhere, the more likely it is that this kind of a transformation will be achieved in the next few years. It's certainly not going to be 50 or 100 years because we're not going to last that long. Whether it's nuclear weapons, climate change, or general global upheaval, I don't think we have more than, say, a decade or two to see this happen. But I'm very optimistic. I do see, you can see it in the demonstrations in Iran. You can see it in movements like the Wasatiyah movement. You can see it with the Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco and United Arab Emirates move towards real peace and not just accommodation, but embrace of their Jewish and Israeli cousins over the last years that the Abraham Accords has been in existence. And we can see the Abraham Accords expanding, hopefully very soon as well, to help all of us to walk that path of peace.
Absolutely, absolutely, the path of peace. There is so much to learn about all this from you, Aryeh, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn about your thoughts, learn from your book, walk that path of peace as early as possible. That's what a lot of people like me, people like you, and hundreds of thousands of people like us in any part of the world. I'm sure. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, my email is aryeh.green@gmail.com, just as my name is spelled, aryeh.green@gmail.com. The book is Finding Peace in the Promised Land. It can be found on Amazon and all other major platforms. I'd be delighted to hear from people on this platform as well as through email or Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever social media people prefer. Happy to hear the responses. Happy to hear criticism and arguments as well, because I think what's most important, this is something that my friend Mohammed Dajani says in his blurb on the back of my book. He doesn't necessarily agree with all of my perspectives, but he definitely believes that the kind of discourse and dialogue that we're having today and that he and I have had for the last 2 decades are imperative to serve the cause of peace, because that kind of discourse and dialogue is what enables us to see each other and to see the humanity in each other and want and believe and know that there's a way to reach that real peace.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.